Something is happening right now, and almost nobody is naming it. The people you used to see everywhere, the thoughtful ones, the deep thinkers, the ones who asked real questions and made you feel something. They're gone, not dead, not failed, just gone. They left social media without a goodbye post. They quit jobs that looked impressive from the outside. They ended friendships that, on paper, seemed perfectly fine. They moved somewhere smaller, quieter, further away. And when you ask them why, they struggle to explain it. They just say something like, "I couldn't keep doing it. It didn't feel real anymore." This isn't a coincidence. This isn't a trend. And it is absolutely not a crisis. It is, in fact, one of the most ancient psychological patterns in human history, described in detail by one of the greatest minds who ever studied the human soul, Carl Jung. Jung called it individuation, the painful, necessary, irreversible process of becoming a whole, conscious human being. And he warned us, clearly, repeatedly, that the further along that path a person travels, the harder it becomes for them to remain comfortable inside a society built on collective sleepwalking. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly why that happens, why the most psychologically developed people are the ones most likely to quietly disappear, why that disappearance is not a tragedy, and what it actually means for them and for the rest of us. Stay with me, because if you've been feeling this, pull yourself. What you're about to hear might be the first thing that makes complete sense in a long time. Let's start with something that sounds harsh, but is actually just honest. Most of what passes for normal human behavior, most of the conversations, the opinions, the arguments, the social rituals, the things people say at dinner parties and post online, is not coming from a place of genuine self-awareness. It's coming from something much older, much deeper, and almost entirely automatic. Jung called this the collective unconscious, not in a mystical, vague sense, but in a very specific psychological sense. He meant that human beings share deep, inherited patterns of feeling, reacting, and projecting, and that most people move through life driven almost entirely by these patterns without ever questioning them. Here's what that looks like in practice. Someone feels deep shame about their own anger, so instead of facing it, they become obsessed with how angry other people are. Someone is terrified of their own weakness, so they project it outward and become contemptuous of anything that looks vulnerable. An entire nation is afraid of something inside itself, so it creates an enemy, a group, a political party, a foreign country, and pours all of that unacknowledged fear and shadow onto them. Jung called this shadow projection. And he said, it isn't the exception to how society works. It is how society works. The system functions because everybody plays along unconsciously. You adopt your role. You accept the agreed-upon villains. You repeat the approved narratives. You perform the expected emotions. And as long as you're doing all of that without examining any of it, you fit. You belong. Life feels relatively smooth, socially speaking. But then something happens to certain people. Something shifts. Maybe it's a loss. Maybe it's a breakdown. Maybe it's years of therapy or meditation or honest journaling. Maybe it's just a slow accumulation of questions that won't stop demanding answers. Whatever triggers it, some people begin to wake up, not metaphorically, but in a deep psychological sense. They begin to see the machinery behind the performance. They start recognizing the projections for what they are. They notice the masks on everyone's faces, including their own, and once you see that, you cannot unsee it. That is where the trouble begins. Jung was not just a theorist writing from a distance. He lived this. As his own psychological development deepened, he found social life increasingly difficult, not because he was arrogant or misanthropic, but because he was, in a very real sense, awake in a room full of people who were talking in their sleep. Think about what that actually means experientially. You're at a dinner table and someone launches into a passionate political rant. And instead of reacting, agreeing or disagreeing, You find yourself watching the whole thing from a different angle. You can see that this person isn't really talking about politics. They're expelling something, some fear, some shame, some wound they've never looked at directly. They've dressed it up as an opinion, given it a target, and now they're hurling it outward with tremendous energy, completely unaware of what's actually happening. And you can't say that. You'd sound insane, or arrogant, or both. So you smile, you nod, you make the appropriate sounds. And inside, you feel more alone than you would if you were sitting in an empty room. This is what Jung described as the burden of consciousness. It's not a spiritual ego trip. It's genuinely isolating. And the more you've done your own inner work, the more you've sat with your own shadow, your own contradictions, your own uncomfortable truths, the more visible everyone else's unexamined material becomes. You watch social media, and you don't see opinions. You see shadow boxing. You see people projecting their unacknowledged darkness onto strangers and calling it justice. You see tribal rage that has almost nothing to do with the stated cause and almost everything to do with what the group has collectively refused to feel. You see wars, international conflicts, culture wars, office politics, and you recognize them as collisions of unintegrated shadow, dressed up in the language of righteousness on both sides. And the more clearly you see it, the less you can participate. Not because you're above it, not because you've figured everything out, but because the act of joining in would require you to pretend you can't see what you see, and that pretending, day after day, interaction after interaction, is its own form of self-betrayal. So people begin to withdraw, first from social media, because it's the most concentrated, most relentless source of unconscious projection on Earth, then from certain social circles, then from careers, then from relationships, not all at once, not dramatically, just quietly, gradually, step by step, like someone backing out of a room they no longer belong in. Jung had a name for the social self we present to the world. He called it the persona, from the Latin word for the masks worn by actors in ancient theater. The persona isn't inherently bad. We all need one. You can't walk through the world with every raw, unfiltered part of yourself exposed at all times. A degree of social performance is just the price of living with other people. The problem is what happens when the persona takes over completely, when you lose track of where the mask ends and the real person begins, when you've been performing so long, so consistently, that the performance starts to feel like the only self you have. Most people live there their entire lives, and it feels fine, because everyone around them is doing the same thing, and there's a kind of comfort in shared numbness. But for some people, something cracks the mask, and through that crack, they catch a glimpse of something deeper, something truer, what Jung called the self, not the ego self, not the social self, but the authentic core of who they actually are. Beneath all the conditioning, the roles, the performances, the expectations, and once you've touched that, even briefly, going back to pure persona performance becomes unbearable. Here's an analogy that might help. Imagine you've been living in a room with no windows your entire life, and you've gotten used to the artificial light. It's fine. It works. Then one day, someone opens a door and you see sunlight for the first time. Real, warm, natural light. And then the door closes again. Can you go back to thinking the fluorescent bulb is sufficient? Can you convince yourself the artificial light is enough? That's what touching your authentic self does to your relationship with persona performance. It ruins you for inauthenticity. Not as a moral judgment, just as a lived reality. Now every board meeting where you're expected to say things you don't believe feels like low-grade suffocation. Every social gathering where you're required to perform cheerfulness you don't feel drains you in a way it never used to. Every relationship that only works if you keep the real you carefully hidden starts to feel like a trap. The awakened person doesn't quit these things out of drama or spite. They exit because staying requires a cost they can no longer afford to pay. The cost of being someone they're not. And here's what's important to understand. This isn't selfishness. This isn't immaturity, or inability to compromise. This is the psyche doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect the integrity of the self. When you stay in environments that require constant inauthenticity, you are not just uncomfortable. You are, in a very real sense, slowly being psychologically eroded. The self doesn't tolerate indefinite suppression. It will find a way out, through depression, through illness, through a sudden and apparently inexplicable desire to blow up your entire life. The people who listen to that signal early are the ones who walk away calmly. The ones who ignore it long enough often leave in pieces. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed nearly enough: the sheer energetic cost of being conscious in an unconscious environment. This is not a metaphor. This is not spiritual language. This is psychology and, increasingly, neuroscience. When you've done significant inner work, you've developed what you might think of as psychological clarity. You've learned to distinguish your own emotional material from what's being projected onto you by others. You've learned to recognize unconscious patterns in yourself and in the people around you. You've built a relationship with your own inner world that requires ongoing attention and maintenance. That's all genuinely valuable. But it comes with a cost that most people don't warn you about. In an environment full of unexamined people, you are constantly receiving unconscious material you didn't ask for. Someone else's unresolved anger lands in the room, and your nervous system registers it, even if nobody acknowledges it. Someone's shame gets projected outward, and suddenly there's a target, maybe you, maybe someone nearby. And you can feel the energetic weight of it even if you can't articulate exactly why. Jung observed that his most developed patients were frequently the ones experiencing chronic fatigue, unexplained physical symptoms, persistent low-level anxiety, and when he examined their lives carefully, the pattern was almost always the same. They were spending enormous psychological energy just surviving their daily environments. Not thriving, not growing, just surviving. Because for an unconscious person, flowing with the collective current requires no effort. They're already inside it. They're part of the stream. But for a conscious person, every day in an unconscious environment is upstream swimming. You are constantly having to not absorb projections that aren't yours, not get pulled into dramas you can see through, not react to provocations you recognize as unconscious, not collapse into the collective numbness, just to make the dissonance stop. That is exhausting. Genuinely, physically, neurologically exhausting. And the solution is not therapy. The solution is not better coping mechanisms or more resilience training. The solution, as Jung discovered, and as his patients discovered, is to change the environment. One woman Jung worked with had developed severe, medically unexplained chronic fatigue after years of teaching. She loved her students. She was committed to her work. She was not someone who gave up easily, but through deep analysis, she realized that she had been hemorrhaging psychological energy every single day, absorbing the unconscious material of 30 children at a time, maintaining her professional persona on top of it, going home and having nothing left. She left teaching, moved somewhere quieter, and within weeks, not months, weeks, her energy returned. Not because she had finally gotten enough sleep, but because she was no longer paying the cost of consciousness in an unconscious environment every single day. This is why the awakened disappear to nature, to solitude, to small, intentional communities. Not because they're running away from responsibility, but because consciousness, real, developed, hard-won consciousness, is not a gift that maintains itself automatically. It requires conditions. It requires space. It requires some degree of protection from the constant pressure of collective unconsciousness. And when you understand that, the disappearance stops looking like retreat. It starts looking like wisdom. Here is the part that tends to confuse people, including the people going through it. When someone in the process of deep psychological development withdraws from society, it doesn't look like transformation from the outside. It looks like a breakdown. It looks like giving up. It looks like someone who couldn't handle it anymore and checked out. Jung saw this pattern over and over again. He called it the Hermit Phase, and he considered it not a failure of the individuation process, but a necessary stage within it. Here's why it's necessary. When you are surrounded by people who unconsciously pressure you to maintain your old patterns, your old persona, your old role, your old way of engaging, transformation is almost impossible. The social field has gravity. It pulls you back toward the familiar version of yourself. Every interaction is a small vote for who you used to be. Solitude breaks that gravitational pull. In solitude, the shadow can integrate without social pressure, forcing it back underground. The authentic self can emerge without the constant demand to perform. The inner voice, which has often been drowned out for years by external noise, can finally be heard. Jung himself went through extended hermit phases. His years at Bollingen, his stone tower on the lake, were not vacations. They were not comfortable retreats. They were periods of intense, sometimes terrifying inner work that would have been impossible to do while maintaining his public life. As a prominent psychiatrist in Zurich, he needed distance from the collective, not because he hated people, but because he needed to hear himself think, not in the shallow sense of quiet and concentration, but in the deep sense of genuine psychological excavation. And you cannot excavate in a crowd. The hermit phase, when it's authentic, when it's genuine withdrawal for the sake of transformation, rather than avoidance, has a particular quality to it. It doesn't feel peaceful. It doesn't feel like a vacation. It feels like hard, often uncomfortable work done in conditions that finally allow the work to happen. And then, at some point, something shifts. The integration happens. The self that emerges from the solitude is not the same self that entered it. It's quieter. It's clearer. It's less reactive. It knows things it didn't know before. Not intellectually, but in the deep lived sense of having gone through something and come out the other side. That is the person who eventually returns. But here's what Jung was careful to point out. The return is not a return to what was. The person who emerges from genuine hermit phase transformation cannot go back to their old life, any more than a butterfly can return to the caterpillar stage. The containers they outgrew are still the same size they were. The person who inhabits them is not, so the return looks different. It's quieter. It's more selective. It's no longer aimed at the center of the social field, at the mainstream, the crowd, the loudest arenas. It's aimed at the edges. The awakened who return tend to find their way to the margins, the places where depth is welcome, where authenticity is possible, where the work of genuine human development can happen without requiring a performance. They become artists who create from a place that has nothing to do with trend or algorithm. They become healers who work with individuals in genuine crisis. They become teachers in small, intimate settings, not lecturing to hundreds, but accompanying a handful of people through real transformation. They become writers whose work finds its readers not because it went viral, but because it said the true thing. They don't disappear permanently, but they don't return to the center either. They inhabit what Jung called the border, present enough to offer what they've developed, protected enough to not be consumed by what they've outgrown. And in that position, they often do more genuine good than they could have done had they stayed, and slowly compromise themselves into uselessness. The collective doesn't always recognize this. From the outside, the border dweller still looks absent, still looks like someone who gave up. The mainstream doesn't have great optics for quiet, unhurried, unperformative contribution. But Jung would say, that's precisely the point. The work happening at the edges isn't for the mainstream's validation. It's for the people who are ready, and those people will find it. So let me bring this all the way home. If you've been feeling the pull to withdraw, to step back, get quiet, put distance between yourself and environments and relationships that feel increasingly hollow, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not broken. You are not antisocial. You are not weak. You may simply be at a point in your psychological development where the old containers no longer fit what you've become, and the discomfort you feel is not a malfunction. It is a signal. It is your inner self telling you that it needs different conditions to continue growing. The disappearance you're feeling pulled toward is not abandonment. It's not escapism. It's not giving up on the world. It is, in Jung's framework, one of the most courageous things a human being can do. Choosing authentic development over comfortable performance. Choosing the difficulty of becoming whole over the ease of remaining fragmented in ways that fit neatly into your social environment. The world needs people who've actually done this work, not people who've read about it, or talk about it, or perform it on social media. People who have actually gone into the discomfort of genuine self-examination and come out the other side carrying something real. And those people, almost without exception, had to disappear for a while to get there. So if that's where you are, let yourself go. Not forever, not without purpose, but with the understanding that what feels like an ending may be the beginning of the most important work you'll ever do. And when you're ready to come back, and you will be, on your own terms, in your own time, you'll return with something worth offering, something that could only have been built in the silence.